Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
I'm Bob Scarborough.
I'm Jade Wally.
and we are the FAIRtax guys. Where's Fat Albert? There he is, right there in front of everybody. That's it.
Can't deploy the banner. For those of you listening on radio, we always go through this ritual. And
Uh-huh.
banner and Bob Paxton has this ginormous Rubik's Cube that represents the tax code. And you want to get a digest version of the tax code, go ahead and pick up or print publication 17 and place it on the back of your toilet and read it while you're contemplating life.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm always pleased and honored when people take time out from their busy schedule to talk to us here on FAIRtax Power Radio. But I am doubly pleased and honored to have a familiar face back with us, Jade Wally. We will not go into the circumstances which forced him to retire from active duty in the FAIRtax Army a while back, but that situation has resolved itself. He is re-enlisted, and we've got him back on the front lines. Jade, thanks so much for being with us, and we are so glad to have you back in the movement.
Thrilled to be back.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, when we were planning this show, I was telling you that you've got the floor. I mean, you can talk about anything you want to here for the next 30 minutes. But there was one question I wanted to ask you, and that is, as a practicing CPA, you and your firm work with some of the biggest corporations, in the country. And I was just curious as to how corporate America, or at least the clients that you're familiar with, how they are reacting to President Trump's stated desire to get rid of the income tax. Are they taking that seriously, or are they dismissing that just as political rhetoric? How does that look from your standpoint?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I'll give you a little preface to it, and then kind of go into the substance of your question. I was looking back, and on January 28th, President Trump said in a speech that between 1870 and 1913, arguably one of the richest periods in American history, that there was no income tax, and it was all really tariffs that funded our United States Treasury and all the receipts that came in. He went on to say that this is a period where instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign citizens, that America had tariffs and taxes on foreign nations to enrich our U.S. citizens. And, Kevin Hassett, he's like the director of the Economic Council, one of President Trump's economic guys. He said that tariffs aren't just a weapon, but they're actually part of a supply side strategy as part of a tax bill. And so that's great. Okay, tariffs, because their tariffs are in the news quite a bit. And I can tell you that there's some unease in corporate America as it relates to just the tariff side, but we're a little bit lacking in the at least what the media portrays, what the corporate response might be to just a complete no income tax situation where you have it replaced with a consumption tax like the fair tax. Tariffs just, it's a buzzword, and it's getting a lot of the taking a lot of the air out of the room. But I can tell you that the concept of it completely eliminating the income tax, no matter what you replace that with, at least part one of the fair tax, right? Because part one is eliminating the IRS. When you look at the 132-page PDF copy of the Fair Tax Act, HR 25, it's only really a couple pages, completely rescinds all the tax code related to individual and corporate income tax, AMT, capital gains, death tax, aka estate tax, and the like. So step one, that's a good start. And what Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary under President Trump, and President Trump have done, we call it a trial balloon. They're floating out there. They're talking about this period of time where it was just tariffs. They're talking about this period of time before the income tax, how great it was for America. And we're getting pretty good response. Um, Two quick things there. Howard Lutnick, a really interesting story if you didn't know. He was like the founder of the firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. Guess where their offices were on September 11th, 2001? The World Trade Center.
World Trade Center.
His brother, his whole firm, just like all killed. He happened to be, from the articles I've read, taking his son to kindergarten, first day of kindergarten, September 11th, that day, and wasn't in the offices. And so it's really a miracle he's even our commerce secretary. But he's strongly floating this idea of no income tax, and I think they're trying to gather feedback from America right now.
Hmm.
So that's step one. I think when I see some of the pundits, they're talking about, potentially no income tax, but I don't hear a lot of corporate reaction. And my gut tells me from the people I talk to is that they still don't believe that could happen. It's almost like too good to be true that America would become the tax haven of the world, that we'd have zero corporate income tax. Remember, I can't remember if it was 12.5%. Ireland lowers, Ron Malero used to talk about this with one of his children, having a job that was based maybe corporate headquarters in Ireland because of the low corporate income tax rate. Well, just imagine 0% corporate income tax rate. The surveys done in the past are that corporate America would love this. And here's one quick thing, because I have a surprise guest I wanted to bring on here in a little bit. But one quick thing here is we keep hearing all this noise about tariffs. Tariffs are an important tool in the tool belt of a president. They're dry powder, negotiating to be treated fairly as a country and all that. Not a bad thing at all. But if we completely just use tariffs instead of the fair tax system, think how lumpy that is. I use the example of, let's say Bob Scarborough here he loves to buy a case of Corona beer from Mexico. And let's just hypothetical. Maybe it's Corona Light because, now that he's up to 30 years old now, the weight doesn't fall off as quickly as it used to. So he gets his case of Corona, and we say, you know what? Anything coming from Mexico, 50% tariff. So now let's just use simple numbers. That $10 case of Corona, now in theory, because just like corporate income taxes, tariffs do fall eventually into the price of what we purchase. So if we say Mexico, you owe us $5, there's a tariff when that case of beer crosses the border. Mexico says, fine, here's your $5. U.S. Treasury. And what are they going to start doing? They're going to say like, well, I'm going to have to recoup this somehow. And usually that'll fall into the price. So now all of a sudden I'm paying $15 and getting a tariff on the $15, and it kind of works its way up to an equilibrium of some kind of magical price, probably just north of $15. And now the price has gone up here in America. And so just like corporate income taxes, tariffs eventually, like in that simple example, we can see usually will fall into the price of what we consume. Now, not always. Sometimes countries will just eat it because they want to stay competitive, or it becomes so uncompetitive they stop shipping that good here. So that's what like India has done to us, for example. There's a lot of cars and things that the tariffs are so high, we can't even compete. Ford can't send a car over there because it would be double the price of a Fiat or whatever they're selling over there, and this, we just don't even ship it anymore. So you can reach that point of, it's not good for us anymore either. So there's a couple things with tariffs. And I said the word lumpy. So we tax and tariff Mexico on our Corona, but we don't tariff Canada on the butter and milk that come across the border. So you're going to get lumpiness in the economy of what really costs something that's non-market too high and what's, fair market value. But the good thing with the fair tax is, which I'm excited about, is it's not lumpy like that. It's a inclusive rate that you pay at the register for any new good or service, and it's not as lumpy as what country does it come from. And so that Corona beer is going to be a lot higher than the equivalent fair market value of that butter from Canada. So to come back to the substance of your question, I hear a lot of noise, but tariffs has taken up 90% of the oxygen in the room. But
Hmm.
I'm excited because, again, fair tax is a two-pronged thing. We get rid of the income tax, and then we usher in the consumption tax to be revenue neutral. I think this past year we took in just under 5 trillion of receipts into our U.S. Treasury. Fair tax would bring in the same exact amount, if not actually higher, for some nuanced reasons. So I think we're on a good path. I don't think there's a good answer to your question because we're not out there on CNBC, Fox Business News talking about, okay, we're coming in with the fair tax to replace income tax. We're just in part A. We haven't got to part B, if that's fair.
All right. All right.
Well, Bob, so I've got with me here this morning my daughter who's in college, her 20-year-old boyfriend, and we just went through an exercise the last couple of days of getting his 23 and 24 tax returns done, and I thought it would be a cool thing to get a Gen Z member to come in, and I actually have a couple questions I'll ask, and I'll put him in this chair if it's okay with you. But if that's all right, let me introduce Brogan to you.
All right, go
Sure.
ahead. I said you'd have the
Um,
floor. You got it.
okay. Well, I have with me here today Brogan Andrus, and he'll come into this chair in a second. He's 20 years old, and he's contemplating an ice hockey scholarship offer, several he's received after investing 2 years in a junior hockey program on the East Coast. For full disclosure, like I said, Brogan's my daughter's boyfriend, so he's not just a random 20-year-old we found hanging around in our suburban Denver neighborhood here. Brogan's planning on attending an MBA program after obtaining his undergraduate degree in finance. Brogan really does have a keen sense of finances and economics and has been doing great in his college classes so far. He's got a strong A in his 5-hour calculus course right now, which,
Oh
quite
man.
frankly, is better than I could do and very impressive. And so over the past 2 days, I've spent some time assisting Brogan with his 23 and 24 federal and state income tax return preparation. And up until now, he's never filed a tax return. So this was a bit of a new experience for him. So I thought it would be great to get the perspective of someone just coming into the workforce about their initial income tax experiences. So let's jump in, and I'm going to put Brogan in the chair.
All right. This ought to be good.
Well, hi everybody. It's nice to meet you. I'm Brogan.
Hey,
Glad to have you on the program. So I'll ask you right off the top of your head, what do you think of the income tax system?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a really new experience for me, and honestly, a little confusing. There was a lot of like different parts and components to it that I just really didn't understand, and I don't think if Jade was there, I would not have been able to get that done. So, huge thank you to him to help me out, and yeah, just really confusing kind of stuff. It took a little bit to understand, and I mean, doing it online didn't really take too long, but when we were filing those 23 tax returns, that took quite a couple hours. So
Yeah, well,
there's a lot to
mo
understand, a bit of math involved there, but we eventually got it done. But yeah, definitely a little confusing on my end for sure.
So
yeah,
Brogan, now that you have experience with the required data gathering, paying $12 to a former employer to get your old W-2, procuring the correct forms for your investments, your crypto, learning what the different categories of income there are from investments such as 1099 DIV, 1099 INT, 1099B for sales of securities, figuring out if the capital gains and losses are short term rather than long term in nature, and then figuring out how to compile all this information, what income tax forms to use, what supporting schedules need to be filled out, just to name a few of your chores these past few days. I was wondering if you had any further thoughts as an individual citizen, when you think about an income tax versus a system like the fair tax, it would be a consumption tax.
Yeah, I mean, think about just everything you just told me there. I mean, you probably took a good minute just trying to explain that all. That's just how many components there are for me to understand, especially as a young person kind of getting into this. And I was really never taught about taxes at school. That's not something you really learn. So it was definitely like I needed you to guide me through all that. And it was definitely like a new experience trying to wrap my head around all of it. And I still don't think I really have that full like perspective of how everything kind of works and interacts with each other. And I do think I would need you again to help me out. And I
I'm not.
honestly was a little surprised by having to pay like $12 for an old W-2 and getting trying to get charged $109 by TurboTax. That was a little bit of surprising thing to me because this is like a required process.
Bob, we switched to a different platform. We're not going to pay $109.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think anybody has their head completely around the income tax system. So don't feel too bad about that. Now, Scarborough, I see you waving your finger in the air. You got a question?
Oh, Mr. Cotter, I have to tell you that I'm in my mid 60s and I still haven't wrapped my head around the tax code. It'll never happen. And as you go through your early career, to owning a home, to having a mortgage, to investing in, the stock market possibly, or having a business, or any of the myriad opportunities there are in this great country, you'll find the tax code is a hindrance, that the federal government in and of itself is an impediment to success. unless you are really pushing hard. Do you fully get what we're talking about with changing from an income tax to a tax on purchases of retail purchases as you go forward? What do you think would be the easier of those two things?
I mean, definitely, it's a lot easier to understand just a simple consumption rate of 23% and having to pay that on every new thing that you sort of buy. And that's definitely a lot easier to wrap my head around. And Jade was kind of explaining it to me, and that probably took about 5 minutes versus the hours we took trying to understand taxes, and I still don't understand those. No, yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to understand and definitely a much easier process, especially for somebody like me who doesn't really know what they're doing. I'd much rather pay my taxes at Walmart, Target, or whenever I'm getting a, new slice of pizza at the store or whatever. Just all those like simple transactions that I really don't have to worry about, like anything. I'm just paying this simple 23% and there's a prebate, so I'll be getting some of that money back and most of that money back, especially for me since I'm so young and probably not making as much. So that's just a lot more of a simple process for me. And I know that I'll actually be able to keep more of my money with the prebate, which is pretty nice.
Well,
Absolutely. I'm not sure you can answer this, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. How can we engage your generation in this whole movement? What's
Yeah,
it
I
going to
mean,
take to?
I think. Oh, So I think the biggest thing about engaging our generation, kind of the younger generation, is definitely just educating us. I mean, I'm probably one of the only Gen Z people that kind of knows about the fair tax system. And I think if you really want to get this concept out there to everybody in America, it's really important to kind of, market it to everybody, especially the younger generation that's just coming into voting. They're not really sure who to vote for yet. They don't
Hmm.
really have like their own identity. And really, they're worrying about stuff like how am I going to buy a house in the future? How am I going to afford a car and what's like going to be the simpler process. And I think like kind of learning about it with the fair tax system and getting all this prebate, I'd be paying a much lower tax when I'm finally an independent citizen. And I'll be able to save some more money, which ultimately I think helps me, pay off my student loans, save up for a house or buy a car. And if I wanted to, I could buy like a used car and I don't have to pay the fair tax on that because that's not a new good. And that's really helpful, for especially somebody young like me who needs to save money.
I got a question for you now. I'm just going to be your buddy. I'm 19 years old. We're sitting, in one of the classes there and everything. What would you say to me? I'm sitting there going, this income tax thing is nuts. How would you sell me your buddy on the fair tax on a tax on consumption versus the income tax?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like kind of just throw it out there like, well, wouldn't it be easier, if you just paid your taxes at Walmart or when you went to the store? And everybody's probably going to say yes, instead of taking hours to just file everything. So you're definitely going to catch their attention by mentioning that. And then once you kind of explain that you're not actually paying the 23%, then people will get really hooked with the when they start to understand the prebate. I remember when I was first learning about it, I was like, 23%, that's wild. How am I gonna, afford that as like a 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid? And then as I learned more about like the prebate and how you get some of that back, you actually pay a lot less. And, probably for quite a while, I'll be paying like less than half of that, like 11.5% or less, which is really nice, and try to save up everything as I was mentioning earlier. And I think every kind of, young kid that's getting into the workforce wants to save as much money as possible. So that's kind of definitely like a huge like eye opener for them.
But Mr. Scarborough, I got to tell you, so it's a real nerdy mathematical term, but it's called an asymptote. And so with the prebate, you never actually get up to that 23%. And I was explaining this to Brogan yesterday, how, with the prebate, even if you spend $5 billion, you're going to be at 22.999%, getting ever closer to the 23%, but never reaching it. And the mathematical concept is called as asymptote. It's an asymptotal rate. And Brogan's like, oh, yeah, I know the asymptote, because like I said, he's in calculus, he's getting an A. You know how many people know that term asymptote? About 1 out of 100. And Brogan knows. So this is a sharp kid.
Now,
All right.
Today being, the day we're recording this is Pi Day. So it's sort of the same thing. You never quite fill up that
Yeah.
conference of, so I had to throw that in because I realized today was Pi Day.
Pi day being the value of pi is 3.141592 and on like that. And this is 314. That's cool there. Cool catch there, Scarborough.
So
But
I think also, and this is something, do you have are you, did you get a student loan to go to college? Are you paying monthly on that or?
So I'm actually enrolling in college full time next year because I was doing 2 years of junior hockey, so I had to be a part-time student. And my mother was really nice enough to kind of like help pay for that, and I was part of the College Opportunity Fund with my community college, so I really didn't have to pay too much, which was really nice, and got some good credits out of the way. So that's going to really help me with school. But no, I am going to have to kind of, take money out of my own pockets and probably, graduate a little bit of debt on, paying back my student loans and everything. And I'm definitely gonna have to take some out, which
Yeah.
is something I kind of worry about, to be honest. But
Mm.
I do like want to know, like, yeah, I think this fair tax system might help me out just a little bit more than, all
Well,
this income tax stuff.
you do know that the fair tax does not apply to education costs. The tuition you pay for your schooling will not include the fair tax. That's not subject there. That's considered an investment, not a retail purchase.
I see. Okay. So yeah, that was definitely something new to learn. So that's really nice that I really don't have to worry about paying a tax on any of that. And maybe there'll be like a little bit of an interest rate with my bank that I take out the loans from. But I mean, that's ultimately really going to help me, make paying off those loans a lot easier, especially, if I'm opting for like a used car in my early 20s or, other used kind of products. So I don't really have to buy as many new things, and then I'll still have my prebate for all my necessities. And that's really just going to help save a lot of money for me, which eventually will help get all those student debt off my shoulders.
All
And
right.
Bob, I have one last question for Brogan, but it'll take a good 5 minutes or so, if you're okay
Go
with
ahead.
that.
That's
Okay.
fine.
So I have written down 5 things here, and I'm going to ask Brogan to pick his one or two favorite things out of these 5 aspects of the fair tax. And I'm going to read them slowly here, and then we're going to put Brogan on the spot, and he's going to have to pick one or two that are his favorite out of these 5. Okay? Okay. So aspect number 1, the income tax goes universally unpaid by people in the U.S. who are here illegally, while the fair tax prebate encourages legal immigration, since the over 20 million, perhaps even over 30 million people who do not legally reside in the U.S. will not receive the prebate when they consume, paying the full 23% inclusive rate at the register. That's aspect number 1, illegal immigration and prebate. Aspect number 2, the fair tax is conservatively estimated to reduce current annual illegal tax evasion by over 90%, reducing the 1 trillion in annual illegal evasion to only 50 billion, because it's harder to evade a sales tax than an income tax. Aspect number 3, the fair tax is voluntary, since spending to live on life's necessities are completely untaxed with the prebate. This eliminates a deeply rooted psychological predisposition for many Americans to cheat on their taxes, because when the sweat off our brow and the fruit of our hard work and labor, that's income to the layperson, is taken from us, we feel a form of violation and theft against us. That's aspect number 3. Aspect number 4, the fair tax finally taxes long-standing generational wealth. Our current income tax has extensive deductions, credits, loopholes, exemptions, and exclusions for the ultra wealthy, and as a result, does not truly tax the generational wealth of the royalty around us. For example, Rockefeller's, J.P. Morgan's family, the Rothschilds, Ford, and so on. But with the fair tax, the rich finally pay their fair share as they spend and consume, whether it's them or their children, with a nice inheritance, and they usually consume the most expensive things like new yachts, mansions, third and fourth homes, and luxury automobiles, which can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars these days. Lastly, aspect number 5, the fair tax will naturally encourage entire new industries of gently used products for resale, since one of the core fair tax principles is that the tax is paid on a new good or service once and only once when consumed at the end use retail level. This means that not only pre-owned homes and cars, but used clothing, furniture, tools, books, electronics, and the like can be sold tax-free. It has been said that the very best form of recycling is to actually reuse a product, and the fair tax will bring this to pass like no other piece of environmental legislation in our nation's history. So really quick to recap the 5 aspects, we'll put Brogan on the spot. Illegal evasion in the prebate. That's an aspect. People in the U.S. illegally and paying the fair tax, 20 to 30 million people that don't file a 1040 now. The third aspect is fair tax is voluntary and you don't have your income taxed, which is the sweat off your brow where you have a psychological predisposition. The fourth is the generational wealth aspect, and lastly, the environmental aspect. Brogan, what gets you the most excited out of those 5?
Oh man, I feel like all 5 of those get me pretty excited. One
Yeah,
thing that
all of the above.
Oh yeah, certainly. I think one of the bigger things that kind of jumps out to me is when you were mentioning about like illegal immigration and how it really encourages legal immigration, which is a process we do have here in America, and I feel like that's not really like broadcasted in the news, so we're putting a lot of people through illegal immigration rather than actually trying to help out these people and get them in the U.S. legally. And with the fair tax system, I think that's going to be a huge like thing we're going to have to focus on is getting these people, legally inside the U.S. so they can get their prebate. Because I bet you most of these people aren't making like the nicest amount of money, so they could use that prebate to really kind of help set their foot off here in this country, and you really kind of build up their wealth and like provide for their families, especially like when they're struggling and really just trying to get started here in America. And paying that full 23% as an illegal citizen, it has to be really taxing on you and your family. And
no pun intended.
yeah, really taxing on you and your family. Which I mean, it's really going to encourage like a lot of legal immigration, and I think that's better for everybody here in America. And I do think like I loved how you used the word like recycle in the last point there. I kind of think this is like a green bill. Like think about how much paper we used yesterday to file our 23 W-2s. I mean, that was a lot of paper, and if everybody's kind of using that and everybody's printing it out, I mean, that's a whole ton of paper. You're using up a bunch of water. You're cutting down a lot of trees, and that's really not the healthiest thing for the earth. Which, I think is like kind of a big thing that people want to focus on nowadays is keeping our earth nice and healthy. So I think with having a fair tax and it's just at the register and you don't really have to print out all this different kind of pieces of paper and everything, that's you're saving a lot of like water and helping out the trees. And I love how you use like, gently used products are going to be like more sought after. So I think things might hold their value a little bit more. Like a gently used car is, going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's not going to have that tax, which people are really going to desire, especially with the 23%. And I actually wasn't aware of like the used homes or like the pre-owned homes, and that's like really nice for somebody like me who's going to be looking to get their first house. I'm definitely going to kind of go into that pre-owned homes market where I don't have to pay that big old 23%, especially when the homes cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'll have to avoid paying that. So I really think that's going to kind of help everything, especially as a young citizen trying to like save up. And I just loved how you used the word recycle there. It just really feels like a green bill and kind of something that helps everybody out, especially the earth.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Smart
thank you
kid.
for having me.
All righty. Well, send Jade back here. We'll wrap this up.
Yeah, totally. Thank you guys so much.
Good job, Brogan. Did Brogan do great or what?
Oh, he nailed it. The thing is, when he was talking about how much you had helped him with his taxes, very few of his generation have that kind of resource available to them. Very few of them, are going with a CPA's daughter.
Right.
And so you've been a tremendous resource to him. That 99.9% of his generation doesn't have that kind of help available to them. So hopefully that will sell all of them on the fair tax. You don't need a CPA to help you with your taxes when you have the fair tax.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get his address so I can send the $15,000 bill for my time, but I can't. He won't give it to me.
Well, I wouldn't give it to you either if you're going to do that.
shoot. But no, I thought he nailed it. And I always like getting, because I know what I like and everything. And so I tried to put a variety of aspects down for him to really think about and pick his favorite. So it's actually, and I kind of gave him a little bit of prep of the questions, but I didn't rehearse with him. I didn't know his answers. And so it's really interesting to hear what really excites him about it. And I love that the answer was all of the above at first, of course.
All
Yes.
right. Well, I tell you what. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I just said yes, absolutely. I'm sitting over here like the dachshund in the back of the Cadillac.
Oh, okay. Well, I tell you what, we've run a bit over time on our FairtaX Power Radio. We'll run the full thing on our video house. Bob, you may have to edit this down a little bit to fit the radio time schedule. But Jade, I tell you what, it is indeed a great pleasure to have you back in the saddle with the FairtaX movement, and we will definitely have to have probably both of you back on the program here before too much longer.
Very good. Always happy to do it. Great to see you, both of you guys.
Good to see
All
you
right.
too.
All righty. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of FairtaX Power Radio. Thank you all so much for watching, listening, sharing the videos. That helps a lot. So until we see you again, same time, same channel next week here on FairtaX Power Radio, I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
I'm Jade Wally.
And we are the FairtaX guys, reminding you the FairtaX is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less.
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may, under the fair tax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.
So I could stay focused and get ahead.
Exactly.